Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we've got quite a few people on, so we're ready to get going. So my name is Tony Cardell. Most of you know me. I'm going to be your moderator today. Let me just go ahead and get go over a couple of things with you, and then we'll get Joe on and go through finished good inventory with you. So today our agenda is, we're going to do the welcome introduction here, do some general comments, talk about a little bit about the goals of our session, review the topic for today's session, and then Joe Hintz is going to do the demonstration. It should last approximately 40 to 50 minutes today, and then we'll open up the floor for questions for as long as that takes. So it's our Ask the Experts webinar series. Again, the presentation will be 40 to 50 minutes. It's a webinar format, which means everybody's going to be muted during the presentation, and then we'll submit questions through the chat window of GoToMeeting. We want to limit the questions to the topic that we're presenting today, which is finished good inventory. But we are going to record this session, and it will be made available to anyone that wants it. After the session, I will circulate a link to our YouTube video channel, and it'll have the full presentation on there. So again, this is Tony Cardell. I'm your moderator. Joe Hintz will be the presenter. So most of you probably already know this, but if you want to ask a question, you can ask it at any time during the presentation. We'll hold the questions until the end, and then go back through and answer those in as much detail as we need to. So the way you do that is you enter your question in the chat window. In the GoToMeeting window box, it's usually over to the right or at the top, you'll see a chat box at the bottom of that screen, and you can just enter your questions there, and we can answer those. So when you enter a question, send it to the organizers, either to the presenter or to the, if you send it to the organizers, that way I can see it and I can moderate the questions and run interference on that for Joe. So look forward to a bunch of questions today. We want to make sure that you guys get the most out of this. Our goal is to explore the product, review it in detail, explain what options are available, review any existing capabilities in this area, finished good inventory, and then maybe some upcoming changes to it as well. Our goal is to get direct feedback from you. So, I know sometimes there's good feedback, sometimes there's bad feedback, but we want all the feedback because our goal is to make this the best possible experience that we can. We want to share best practices based on our experience and just build knowledge within our customer community. So with that, I'm going to make Joe the presenter. We're going to go through and talk about finished good inventory today. So Joe, I'm getting ready to make you the presenter, and I'll also unmute you, or you did yourself. That's great. Okay, so let me make you the presenter. And there you are. Can you hear me, Joe?
Yes.
Perfect. I can hear you good. So take it away.
Okay. As Tony said, today is finished goods, and what I'm going to kind of give you an overview on everything and kind of give you some tips and tricks that you may not be familiar with. So I am going to go through all the various transactions here and explain them. I'm going to go through the file maintenance routines, really going through each one of the tabs, the view tab, the inventory tab, the totals, and so forth. I'm also going to go through some of the reporting and some of these other options that we have here. But what I want to start with first of all are the icons. So first of all, when you go into the browser, the top, as you can see, we do have some new icons. You might not be familiar with these, but they're just a nicer looking icons than that we've always had. And you'll notice this is a full screen. So if I click this help button and click about, that maximizes the screen. So when I come back and I come in, I've got all these fields available so I can just scroll up and down. The other thing you can do is you can export to Excel and go, it's basically a report writer. We also have the ability to manipulate the columns. So you can shrink the columns, expand the columns, you can move the columns around. So if you wanted the estimate number to be first, a number to be second, or vice versa. You can rearrange these however you want. Now, when you exit out, it'll say you want to save that, and you can save those. So the next time you go in, your browser is exactly in the format that you wanted. Of course, we have the book icon, which are notes. We call these spec notes. And a spec note is tied to the specific finished good item. And that spec note can be used on a purchase order. And it'll carry over to every estimate that item may be used on. So any repeat job, whether it's a single, tandem, combo, those notes will carry forward to that item. So that's the spec notes. What I want to start with is a new security option we have. Obviously, you can go into the finished goods file. You will notice if I do a lookup, I can select any customer I want, but you notice it's not letting me look at the details of those items for that customer. The same thing is true when you go to reporting. If I have the reports up, you'll notice that there is no customer range here. And there's no, if I go to various reports, my customer range is gone. The only thing I can do is I can click this preview button, and you can see these are the only customers that I can review. What this was written for initially was for salespeople so that you can give them access to let them run reports or view orders or things of that nature, or even go into the item file, but they can't look at other customers, I should say other sales reps' customers' information, specifically the finished goods items. And the way that works is there's an NK1 parameter called customer list, and if you turn that on, you can then go to this browse form, and down here with the character value, if I just type in I, you'll see that I have the IF1, which are hotkeys. Go to IF1, and I can limit what customers are displayed there by clicking this toggle box here that says limit customers. So I can do the same thing with any report. Basically, it's universal throughout the whole system, but we're focusing on inventory. So if I was to go IR, these are all the inventory reports, and you can see I've limited the access to this. So any one of those reports, no matter which one I go into, I can't print the entire range of items for customers. I can only click preview. Now I could select them all, or I could select just one, or if I wanted to just select one, and it would only give me that information. Now all of our reports can now have a report writer option. And you'll notice you've got these two columns you may not be familiar with. Well, if I just click default, this is my default report, and I can also go directly to Excel. I'm going to go strictly to the screen. And I didn't pick anything, but you can customize your reports. So in this example, you can see all these extra fields are available on our on-hand report, but I've only picked these specific fields. And for instance, if I wanted to move the customer number up or down, I can move that up or down. And then when I print, that's a password option to display the cost. Now, I'm not sure how long this is going to take. It shouldn't take too long. But that'll eliminate the cost, and that's an NK1 parameter as well. I may actually cancel this. Oh, it wasn't too bad. So anyhow, you can see the customer number is now first on this report. So you can rearrange and make this report how you want. And that NK1 parameter called, I don't know off the top of my head, I think it's called reports. But that lets you have a report writer. I'm actually going to go to the user file. This is where you find by user ID the customers. So this is why only these customers were displayed, or I have access just to those for that user ID. I'm going to delete all those and give me rights to everything. So I'm going to go into the item file now, and I'm going to start to explain options in the item file. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to type in a customer. I should say an item number for a customer. And I'm just going to go through this one item. By the way, I'm just going to cut. This is a little trick too. You can do a cut and then a paste. If I get out of here, Control X or Control C does a cut and a copy, and Control V paste it so I don't have to retype it next time. But you may not know this. We do have a wildcard search also. If you put an asterisk and then, for instance, the word soup, asterisk, you notice it's not the beginning of the name. It's in the middle here, but it shows me all the boxes that have the text string soup in it. So that's what I'm focusing on. But I want to go back to that specific item, and I want to go through the fields and some of the options. So let me get to that section. So the browser, again, one thing also with the browser, there's NK1 parameter. If you don't want to show all the items all at once, you can limit just showing 5 or 10 at a time. Now, if you only show 5 or 10 or 20 at a time, you know, you won't be able to scroll, but then you would use your next button. So let's go back to this item and go through some of the details of this item. So I'm going to go to the View Item screen, and most of this information makes pretty, you know, you're probably familiar with, but I want to go through some of these things. There are some fields in here that you may not know, but under the group code, there's lookups. Like, for instance, for inventory class, I can press F1. And I've entered those groups, A, B, C through F. There's a production code. I can press F1, and I can put in what production codes these are. Likewise, this sales group, I can input whatever sales groups I want. These lookups are user definable. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to go over here to the change users groups. And so you can see here, if I just go FG, these are some of the ones that I was just looking at. So FG class, you'll have to create a user group exactly with these characters, FG space class, and then you'll notice the users that I put in here are separated by commas. That's what's on my F1 lookup. So that's a way so you can control what they're actually entering in those fields. Same thing with the cycle count code. I put in weekly, monthly, yearly, quarterly. That's what's going to be on my F1 lookup. The same thing with the production code here is that it's all driven by the user groups. So, and then the sales group, again, I could also do under the description, I could do a wildcard search here, I believe. I may be wrong. Yes, I can. So there's wildcard searches becoming more prevalent throughout our system. And here's where it says sales groups. Okay. Oops, picked the wrong one. So there's where I said medical and sales. So that's really important for looking up, you know, different categories of inventory class, cycle counts, production codes. Of course, all this information comes in from your estimating, and it's completely linked. If I make any changes here to this, let's say I want to say this is 200C paper, and I click Save, you'll notice a pop-up. This is updating the description and information for an item to have it automatically rip through the estimate and the orders. The best place to do that is in the finished goods file. And you'll notice it says, do you want to update the order? And you can update what fields you would like to update. Or you can say no. But then it also gives you the option, well, what fields do you want to update? What estimate fields do you want to update? And that's the way to get that information ripped through all the other files. I want to explain the ship method, the case, and pallet. It really comes into play mostly for sharpshooter. When you're scanning a pallet tag, specifically when you're shipping, if you set this to pallet, it's not going to prompt for a partial quantity or a case count. It's just going to scan and import the entire pallet and prompt for the next barcoded pallet tag. So you're just going to be scanning pallets and putting them on the truck. If you click this by the case which is also by the bundle, then it's going to prompt with each, once you scan each pallet bag, it's going to say how many cases are you shipping. So if you're going to do partial pallets, the item has to be set to case. Another important thing we've added, we've always had this, but now we're utilizing it, the status, active, inactive. We've got a utility, and I'm not going to go through it, but it's under NR, and you're going to run it. And within this list of utilities, it's called active, inactive. Actually, I will run it. I'm not going to run it, but I'm just going to pop it up. This gives you, what this is going to do, this utility, is it'll look at all your finished good items. And if there's nothing on hand, there's been no activity, and you can put the date. You may say from 12/31/2014. If I've had no activity, no orders, no nothing pertaining, it'll go through thousands of inventory records and automatically set them all to inactive. The benefit of having inactive items is when you run a report, it'll run faster. So if I go to this report here, an example, you see this toggle box down here, include inactive items. That's going to go through every item in your entire system to generate this report. If you exclude this, then it's only going to go through the items that are active. So it's going to substantially help your response time when printing reports. So you're going to run that utility to set items inactive, and quite honestly, if the item's inactive, when you try to place an order for it, it'll say this item's inactive. You just need to go reset it to active, and then you can continue with that item. I think I got out of that item by accident, but let's see, it's still down here. No, it's not. So I can do a Control-V, which is nice and handy. Another thing that a lot of people aren't familiar with is this little toggle box right here. Our system automatically calculates the shipping weight, and it's going to do it every time you place an order. Now, if you know the weight, if it's a repeat item and you weighed it and you know exactly what it weighs, you can actually put in the weight here, and then if you check this toggle box, our system will stop calculating the weight when you're processing bill of ladings. So if you know the weight, put it in, click the toggle box, and then our system stops calculating this weight field. Of course, you know, purchase, manufactured, custom stock. Stock boxes obviously can be tied to the pricing matrix in order processing for pricing purposes. I'm going to go over to the inventory tab and explain this tab a little bit. Really, it's pretty self-explanatory. The only thing I want to explain is you got a drop-down box here now. And people that have multiple warehouses, our inventory control has always been to the warehouse, but a few years ago, we actually added the ability to provide a reorder advice report by warehouse. And so you can come here and you can say, show me what's in the main warehouse. So I got 3,900 on hand in the main warehouse. How much is in the Texas? I've got 1,500 in the Texas location. But you'll also notice I can have different reorder levels. So for each location, I can actually, don't have one here, but I could have a different reorder level for each location. So the grand total is, if you go to the all warehouses, it gives you the grand totals here. But for instance, if you're selling 10 by 10 by 10s and you have a warehouse in California and you have a warehouse in Pennsylvania, they have to be on hand ready to ship. So you need to print a reorder advice report by warehouse. And the importance with that is when you place an order, we need to know where it's going to ship from. And that's why you will see a prompt and order entry, ship from. And that's why it's asking for what location, so that it can properly allocate to the order what location it's shipping from. So this bucket right here is accurate. By the way, there is an NK1 parameter as to, well, in inventory, the allocated is always just total orders allocated to that warehouse. But there is an option in order processing where you can say, I only want allocated to equal what's actually an actual release. So when I start processing the release, that's the only time the quantity allocated is updated. Again, that's a parameter. You can either have it what's just the grand total, which is what inventory does, or you can have it based on actual releases. Now this is not a set, but I want to explain these options up here, which really have to do with sets. A single item is just a single item and there's one piece. But when you have a set with multiple components, which we call components, or a kit with components, assembled and assembled with parts work two different ways. Basically, when you're going to assemble, let's say you have a length and a width partition that's being assembled together to make a finished set. If you say this is assembled, then you're going to receive the length partitions, and then you're going to receive the width partitions. So it's 2 receipts, 2 postings to get those on hand. Then you receive the set item, and what that does is automatically reduce, or it adjusts the quantity of the 2 components. If you click this button here, it's basically for saving data entry time. And what that will do, and I think I already have an option, I already have one in process out here. Yes, so what I can actually re-enter this, but what this does is actually, when it's assembled with parts, it's receiving the component. So you can see I've got an 18,000 or 2,000 over here. It's a partial pallet in this case. So I've got 2,000 that I'm receiving, 3,000 I'm receiving, but I'm simultaneously subtracting 2,000 and 3,000. Now, if that was just assembled, what I would have is just these 2 transactions here. So I would just be subtracting from my components. So if you just want to save yourself some time, you set it to assemble with parts, and when you enter the quantity here, it automatically builds all 4 components, the receipts and the subtractions, which are adjustments. These will be adjustments, by the way, because we don't want to create a receipt because it'll throw off our production. So let me go back here. So let's go to the next option. This total CP number, if you have some kind of a stock box item that you can sell to multiple different clients, this tab was originally written for that, so that you can actually have a different customer part number. It's in this case, it's a 10 by 10 by 15. Maybe you sell that to a lot of different clients. So you could say, for Abbott Laboratories, they call that stock box dash 10 by 10 by 15. And so IBM can call it what they want to call it, ABV 1000 can call it whatever they want, and so forth. And what the important part to that is, when it goes to the order, goes to the invoice, it has their part number on it, but you only have to produce one item. So you're producing this one item, but the customers can call it whatever they want. Oops, didn't mean to do that. You'll notice I have a sales rep down here. So the sales reps typically are defined by customer, but we've got some clients that have national accounts all over the country, and if that national rep landed that business, he's going to continue to get a commission on that. So you can actually define a salesperson by finished good item. And likewise, you can actually further make it unique by customer's part number. So that's why you have the sales rep here. So this will take a priority over the sales rep as the general sales rep, and it'll take a priority over the sales rep in the customer file as well. Also, you have a unique case. This is for your label matrix software. Typically you have your labels, your case labels defined by a customer, or you have a just generic one for your plant. You can have a specific label by finished good item. Likewise, you can have a specific label, a pallet tag by finished good item. So the bin location, the bins and jobs, this is basically showing you everything that was down here. Oh, by the way, if you wanted to add a new warehouse, you click this plus sign. And that's how you add a new warehouse if you want to control inventory reorder levels, I should say. You can add warehouses in the warehouse file, but if you want to have multiple reorder vice levels by warehouse, you would click the plus sign on this inventory tab. Bins jobs is basically showing you the history of what's on hand. Now, if you want to see what's zero, then it's going to expand it and show you everything that the true history. But if you just get rid of that, then it's just going to show you what's on hand by tag, by job. If it's a vendor PO that you bought it, it's going to show you the PO number. And this, when we do a recalc quantity, which is this button right here, or for that matter, we're going to do a recalc cost, it's only looking at what's on hand in the file bins jobs file. I do want to also say anybody who's doing this recalc program, the old habits used to be to delete zero bins. Do not do that. That can cause problems with the recalc not problems, but it can exclude items that you want to include. So we add the toggle box to not display items that have zero on hand. So whenever you do the recalc, leave these unchecked, and it'll have better results. Like I said, we have this toggle box now, so you don't need to delete them. If you want to not see them, just leave this toggle box unchecked. But when you recalc everything. Okay, the colors, this colors tab was for a client that has both a web-fed and sheet-fed printing press. Obviously, the inks for a flexo press, the inks are different than an offset sheet-fed press. So they can capture both inks in the colors tab for this item. And in the estimating program, when you say recalc inks, it'll say, well, what do you want, which inks do you want to use? But obviously, it's got to be unique to the press. So if you pull in flexo inks, it's going to generate or point to a flexo press on your routing. If you import offset inks, it's going to direct it to an offset printer. But you can, that's what the colors tab, it does import or transfer all the colors from your estimate to this tab. Oh, one other thing I forgot to do. If you ever have MSF quantity issues on sales reports, if they're not adding up properly, you've done changes, overrides to the estimates or whatever, you've changed the formulas in your style file. This here gives you the option to recalculate the square footage numbers. You can do it just for this item by saying no, or you can do it for all the items in the entire system. So if I just want to, I'm sorry, vice versa. If I say yes, it's just going to recalculate this item. Okay, so that's an option, but you can rip through the entire finished goods file by saying no to that field. The vend cost tab works much like raw materials in that you have a price matrix for each vendor. So this really is for farm out items. If something or any stock purchased item that you're going to buy and resell, you can have all your costs in the vend cost tab. And of course, you have besides that, you also have your minimum maximum sheet and length criteria for your vendor that you're buying this material from. The history tab, all your transactions land here in the history tab, which the net result of all this shows you here, shows on the bins jobs tabs, and then the summary of all that, goes to your cost. So this cost here is a summary of everything that's on hand. It's an average cost of what's on hand. Okay. Now the history tab, again, you can change columns around. So if you never buy something, you can move that. You could move that vendor field way to the right. If you never, this customer number here for invoice only. If you never do invoice only, then move it out of the way. So you can tailor the screen however you want it. With security rights, ASI has security rights, and we have a program master program that gives you security rights whereby you can change things. It might be the date's wrong. And if you make a change, you can just keep arrowing down and keep changing the date or changing whatever you need. You know, yesterday I was online with somebody and they had the wrong unit of measure. So I basically went to the unit of measure, updated the unit of measure, I did a Control V, Control X and a Control V, and I just went right down. And then after I was all done, I went and recalculated the inventory and everything was corrected. So the history gives you, it's really for security, people with security rights, but it gives you the ability, for instance, I must have accidentally got rid of this cost here. So I would want to put this cost back in. Oops. 8933. Okay, and then obviously I'd want to recap my quantities, recap my cost. The image file just gives you the ability to attach an image to the item, much like in estimating, and this just gives you a history of your purchase orders. I want to go through some of the inventory transactions, starting with the receipts transaction. So obviously the receipts, you know how to do receipts, but I want to focus on, well, first of all, this is set, so I explained that. And there's an NK1 as to how sets work. And I'm sorry, there's one other thing that I forgot in the finished goods file. There's a spec card. And actually, let me go back to that item that I was working on to begin with. I think that might be better. The spec card we wrote for a client. Not sure what code I put in here, but this prints, just a spec card of that finished good item. And I'm not sure what they use it for, but they use it for some reason. And just want to let you know that it's available. That's a little spec card tab down here at the bottom. So let's go back to the transactions. So you have sets. What warehouse defaults as a default? There's an NK1 parameter. Now, I'm not sure how this set's working here, but yeah, you see that it defaulted to the same as the set. That's a parameter. You may not want that to happen. If you have your inventory set to assemble with all parts, then you're not receiving individual components. It's just, you're throwing out whatever the extras are for the components. You might want to set that to default to the item. Whatever the item is here, it's going to default to the same warehouse and bin location. Otherwise, you might want to say set it to, that was set to finished goods set. Otherwise, you may want to say set it to the item. So wherever the item is located, that's where it's going to pull it from and deduct it from. The one thing I want to show you on oops, let's do a look up there. On the, oops, I'm in the wrong thing. I'm sorry, I apologize. What I wanted to show you was in the cycle counting. A lot of people don't know, I already have it set up here. The tag number, the easiest way to do cycle counting for a lot of tags is you can press F1 here. F1 on the tag number, and basically if I wanted to say all these are gone, I could just highlight those items, and then I could say import quantity on hand, that's what the O/H means, or import on hand equals 0. So without scanning or typing everything, it just brings them all in, and you notice to put them all at 0. So once you're in IC2 for cycle counting, tab over to the tag number F1, and you've got some nice options for speeding up the cycle count process. So that's a little trick. So the finished goods receipts, let's go back to the transfers. One thing I'm not even going to show it, but especially when people have pallet tags, sometimes you'll ship a partial pallet tag, different pallet tags. You'll have multiple partial pallet tags, and you want to consolidate them. So you can actually consolidate those tags. It really creates a transfer transaction, but the options down here will consolidate tags, and it's also in the sharpshooter program, but you can manually do it here, and you can say, okay, I want to consolidate this tag into this tag, and basically, you end up with a whole pallet, or at least a more full pallet, by combining 2, 3, 4 pallets onto one pallet. So it's a nice option. It's called finished goods consolidate tags. Transfers is really just transferring from one warehouse to the other. The reason I do want to mention this, though, is the best way, another option for transferring. Let me see if I get to the right item here. So basically, pretty much any order, quite honestly, if you wanted to do a transfer, you can just say add, and you can just click the T, and that is a transfer. Now, the benefit of creating a transfer through order entry rather than through finished goods is you can create a bill of lading document. So this is just a normal release, whatever. Let's say you want to transfer 1,000 to another warehouse. Now, you do have an option here on the ship to. You could actually look up. You notice the F1, if you escape out of the transfer button, it shows you all the locations for the box plant, which this is Advanced Packaging Corp. So here's the box plant warehouses, and then here's all the customer locations. So if I was just going to do a transfer from one warehouse to another, I could do it this way, and I'd save that, and I would just process like a normal bill of lading. I could go through Sharpshooter with that and scan the pallets, put them on the truck, create the bill of lading. When you post that bill of lading is when it actually creates your inventory transfer. So when you post that bill of lading, it's going to end up over here, back here in the transfer screen. So if you want all that paperwork automatically, then do your transfers through as a transfer, release, and order entry. Okay. The other thing, I missed another thing, receipts. And I really didn't miss it, but I want to explain. There's an NK1 parameter for the receipts, and it's got a lot of options. It's called FG receipt, I believe. I think it's FG receipt. There's actually two. There's one called FG warehouse bin, and the other one, I believe, there's also FG set receipt. And anyhow, it gives you, one of the powerful options is if you have an order for, let's say, 1,000, and the release, the order by default has a release quantity of 1,000. Now, a lot of clients are taking product right from their last machine and it's going right to the truck. And let's just say they had an extra 200 on another pallet. Well, a lot of times at 1,000, the truck driver gets that last pallet, he sees the pick ticket says 1,000, and he doesn't know you're producing another 200 boxes or 200 sheets. And so a lot of times those 200 sheets just stay in your warehouse and you end up throwing them out. Now the Sharpshooter program shows you right on the screen how many have been produced, so that's, you can train them on the Sharpshooter program. At the very top it'll say quantity ordered, quantity produced, and so you'll teach your truck driver or your forklift driver to tell the truck driver to wait till the finished goods come off of the last machine. But we have a parameter now that will automatically, based on finished goods receipts, automatically update the release quantity. So if you produce 1,200, it'll automatically update the release quantity to 1,200. Now there's a lot of parameters for that, or a lot of scenarios for that. If the release is sitting in the order entry file, it'll update it immediately. If it's sitting in the release file, then I think it's the integer value 1 versus 0. It'll either update it or not update it. So if it's already been processed, it's not going to update it. So depending on the switch settings, you can automatically have the system update your release quantities based on the finished goods receipt for that job, which is a very powerful way to hopefully save some inventory. Another thing that I want to show you in receipts, if I go to the purchase order, and I'm going to purchase order 456, this is a drop shipment, okay? And you notice it says D for drop shipment, and it's got the ship to, which is your customer, because it's going to prompt what customer, what ship to location for that customer. So if you're doing ship tos, drop shipments for farm outs, anything on the side, and obviously all the information this is on the item screen. This is already closed, but what you can do, there's a parameter that'll automatically eliminate a lot of steps. So when you go to receipts program here, I'm going to delete this guy. I'm going to click add, and I'm going to type a PO number 456, and let's just say that quantity there. In other words, your vendor has said, hey, I just shipped, in this case, whatever, 8 times 625 boxes to your customer. And so I'm going to send you an invoice. Well, you obviously want to invoice your customer. So you go through this process, and you're going to get this pop-up. Again, you have to turn this on. It's an NK1 parameter called FG, I think, invoice receipts, and there's options there too. So all you have to do is click this, and then if you want to include freight, you can actually click that and say, okay, I've got $50 in freight on. And if you want to email it, you can email it. So what this will do is automatically create a release, post the release, create a bill of lading, post a bill of lading, and put it in the invoicing program. But it does it all in the background. So it doesn't do it right there. It does it when you actually post. So when you go here to post, it's going to create that invoice immediately. If you ever have to, I've had clients go, I love that option, but my client wants to see the bill of lading that shipped on. You can actually go back to the bill of lading. You can delete the invoice and do whatever you need to that bill of lading. So that's an option that a lot of clients don't know that can save a lot of keystrokes. The delete zero quantity bins here, this option here, this is an option, all this does is a cycle count of all your items. New clients use it when they want to go live, but people that have bought Sharpshooter and they have their tags in inventory, they can use this utility. It zeroes out their entire inventory, then they go to cycle count and they just start scanning everything that's on hand. And then they post that, and that's their current on-hand inventory. I would use this with caution, but that's what that's all about. The move finished goods to board, that's if you produced, let's say you produced a corrugated pad, and it's actually a finished good item that you might sell, but you need to use that pad as part of another set or another item. And you're going to take that pad and you're going to score it or do something with it. You can actually move that finished good item back to a raw material item. It moves all the quantities and costs so that then you could use that item on an estimate again. And I did explain the FG, the consolidate tags. The FG issue is if you have farm out items that's part of a job, you need to get that cost issued to the job, and this is how you do it. Obviously, you've got all your labor. You know how to do labor through data collection. You know how to do your finished goods or your raw materials receipts. You issue receipts to the job. Well, if you have any purchased items, you need to issue those to the job, and that's where you do it through IU9. So let's see here. I think I'm moving pretty good here. The posting when you post through finished good posting here, there are again NK1 parameters. There's an NK1, it's called FG post, and there's a lot of options there. One of the options, it says when do you want to print this posting report? We've had clients that say, hey, I've got a posting report that says I posted 5,000 on hand, but I look at my inventory and it's different. I said, well, you could have said no to post and then change something and then post it again. If you want that audit trail to be the Bible, then you can turn this off so that when you won't get this pop-up, it's just going to post, and then you're going to get the report. So the report is actually factual what you posted. So you can have this posting report print before or after you post, or both. So that's an option. So if you want that posting report to always be the Bible, meaning that's fact, we posted it, then I would say set that to print the report after you post it. And actually the logic to update the release quantity from the finished goods receipts, that is under the NK1 post parameter, and it's got to do with the integer value. Okay, I think I've really gone through a lot of things here. The right, I just want to go through this, the right end of period doesn't have to be run, but what this does is it puts all your month-to-date figures in your year-to-date figures, and that's all it really does. So that when you look at your inventory, it says what's my month-to-date sales, cost, quantities on your total screen. That right period reports is what that's all about. So when you look at these numbers, if you want to move period to date over to year to date, at the end of each month is when you should run that report. And then obviously if at the end of the year you run it, it's going to move year to date over into last year. And it does it by the dates that the transactions are posted. The only other main NK1 parameter I want to discuss is the BOL post parameter. And it has to do with transfers as well. And besides transfers, another way of doing a return, obviously you can go to order processing and you can say levy returns. That does not create any document whatsoever. It's just a process of returning good inventory. What a lot of our clients do is if they're going to return something, I think this was already shipped, but let's just see. Yeah, this was shipped here. So if I was going to return something for this order, which as you can see, and again, you can see I've set up all my buckets of data, and it's a full screen, so I can see exactly, I don't see the on-hand quantity, but I could move that over here so now I can see what's on hand, what's been ordered, what's been produced, and I can just scroll over. I can see what's been shipped, and actually we even have fields that's not, what's actually been released. All the way on the end I can see what's been returned, but I can move these buckets wherever I want. I should say these columns. But most people, I'm not sure about most people, but a lot of clients, if they're going to process a return, in this case you can see that negative 1,000, you can create a negative release. And what happens with a normal positive bill of lading is it subtracts from inventory. So what a negative quantity release will do, two negatives is a positive. So when I post that bill of lading, that's going to add to inventory. So a negative from a negative is a positive, so it's going to put 1,000 back on hand. Well, the NK1 parameter called BOL post has different options as to how that gets treated. So some clients say, I don't want it, I want my inventory to be 0. And when I receive it back, then I'll do a cycle count or I'll do a return. But when I create this negative, I want inventory to be 0. Other clients want that to be a positive 1,000, sitting on hand. Now that positive 1,000 is in what we call a blank bin location. There's no tag number, there's no bin location. So we know that that's really a fictitious on-hand quantity. And then when you actually process the return, it'll subtract if you get, let's say you had 2 pallets of 500 were returned, if you had to rework them, do something to them, and you ended up, putting them back in inventory, you do a process of return, and it reduces that 1,000 that has no blank inventory, and then it would put the other 2 pallets of 500 back on hand. And just going to get off the speakerphone. Julie's actually working in the background. So anyhow, that's bill of lading post is a good option. Gives you different options of how you want to handle negative releases, which are really returns. With that said, I'm going to conclude the overview. I try to cover a lot of the things that you may not be doing right now. I'm going to turn it over to Tony with questions and take it from there.
All right, Joe, thank you very much. So we do have a couple questions. Let me see if I can bring those up. We can answer those. So the first question comes from Dave, and his question is, he says, on some items, I've seen that the time of receipt until the time of release for the shipment, the warehouse bin locations are changed. For example, received into the main warehouse floor bin, and then when producing a release for the shipment, the item quantity has been changed to main warehouse with no bin specified. This doesn't allow the bill of lading to post.
Mm-hmm.
Can you answer that or talk to that?
Sure. Well, the one, first of all, let's explain it a little bit better. Under BOL post, what he's saying is he's got this flag set here which says that my bin quantity must be greater than my on-hand quantity. That's what that means. And if that's set, then what you're shipping has to be greater than or equal to what's in the warehouse. What happens sometimes with clients, our software is not doing it, but it gets back to the default. And I alluded to it, but I think it's FG warehouse bin is your default. Now you can see here my default is FG item. What that means is when I do a finished goods receipt, I go here to IU1 and I do a receipt, that warehouse bin that comes in as a receipt is going to default from my finished goods file. Okay, so whatever I have defaulted here in my finished goods file is how my receipt is going to be defined. There's a couple other options, but if you create a release before you've ever received the goods, it's probably going to default to main floor. So if you create a release and you create a bill of lading, but you haven't done the receipts yet, you can have a mismatch. So unfortunately, the only option is when you go to the bill of lading, you're going to have to, when you get that error message, I mean, I'd have to go create real quick, but there's a select bin tags option. So let me just go create a release real quick. So I'm just going to go to the bill of lading. So that's an example. That's probably going to default to main floor unless I pick certain tags. But if there's a mismatch between the bin location where you received it versus where you're shipping it, you're going to have to click select bin tags and select the right bin location so that they match. And that's the only input I can give without looking, at your data in more details.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So Dave, if that did not answer your question, just send me another message and we'll try to dig back in. I have another question, Joe, from Jose. What is the NK option for us to activate auto invoicing after the bill of lading posting?
Invoices always, well, if you're posting a bill of lading one at a time, there is no, well, actually there is an NK1, but I don't think it's by user ID really. This little toggle box down here, when I print this, it's saved. So in other words, if I go to print this, okay, and then if I go reprint it again, it's not checked. But if I check that and then I post it, see, this is that insufficient inventory Dave was talking about. There's a mismatch. Okay, that's exactly what he's getting. It shows him a report. So what he has to do is he has to select bin tags and then select the appropriate locations or bin or tag, and then you'll have a match. Then it'll match. Okay. And then I could actually post this invoice. So now I'm going to post it. So once I print it and I say yes, that creates the invoice. There's really no NK1 flag. It's just that toggle box at the bottom of the screen. And that's also true with your bill waiting. If you do it this way, well, actually there is no toggle box, but the toggle box just invokes this program. So it's really a toggle box setting. There is, if the client is using Sharpshooter and he wants the person who's creating the bill of lading in Sharpshooter, there is an NK1 for that toggle box. I'd have to look it up, but that's a Sharpshooter toggle box, really.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. So looking for some more questions. If anyone has a question, just type it into the chat box there and we'll get it answered. Jose said thank you. So hoping that we're getting these questions answered for everyone. Are there other questions that we can answer while we have Joe on the line here? Anything related to finished inventory? You know, sometimes we tend to go too fast because Joe is very knowledgeable of the system. So if there's anything you want us to go back and look at, if we went a little too fast on any particular item, just type that into the chat box and we'll be happy to go back and review that. There will be a recording of this as well. So you'll be able to see the recording and pause it, go back, go forward. That's what's good about recording these sessions. It gives you a chance to review them and look at them again. I have no other questions at the minute, Joe. Let's give it a minute or two. Let's see if there's any other questions that we can answer for anyone. If you have a question, just type it into the chat box, and we'll get going with it. Joe, can you think of any common questions that someone might ask frequently for finished good inventory?
A lot of times people might have a bad cost in inventory and they need to correct it. What has to happen there is you have to fix your estimate. You have to rebuild your job cost. Obviously, the inventory has already been posted, so the cost is bad in the history file. So what you need to do is you need to go, after you update your cost, your job cost, then if you want to fix the costs that have been put in inventory, you can run this utility here, NY12, for that item. Now, if the cost is 0 or question mark, you can just fix that, or you can just update the cost period. Maybe use a different board or a different machine or whatever it may be, or something. You deleted the material by accident and then the cost was question mark. This will rip through and update the cost for all the posted finished goods transactions. So that's it. NY12 will fix the cost in the finished goods file, and then NYQ12 fixes the cost on the invoice, because typically bears its head when they can't get a commission report because the cost is either wrong or a question mark.
Hey, Joe, I do have another question that's come in from our buddy, Mr. Cormier. Does the negative receipt, when posted via OU1, create a credit note?
It creates an invoice, which is a negative invoice, which is kind of the same difference. But no, it does not create a credit memo. The only way to create a credit memo is through the levy returns process. Levy returns, which doesn't create a bill rating, will it'll create a receipt transaction, which we call a return receipt, and then it'll simultaneously create a credit memo for the receivables. But we do a negative release, that creates a negative bill of lading. When you post a bill of lading, it creates an invoice, but with a negative quantity and negative dollar amount, which is basically the same as a credit memo.
Perfect. Any other questions, or Mr. Cormier, did that answer your question? If not, type us a note. But are there any other questions that anyone has for Joe related to finished good inventory? We'll give it a couple of minutes here, Joe, and I think we may be ready to wrap up.